I'm so glad you're with us today. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Simon is the co-founder and CEO for Butterfly. Formerly, I understand you drove Coca-Cola's transition team for digital marketing across all of Europe and grew the team to secure $2.4 million in seed funding, which is pretty impressive. And then what you've done with Butterfly is super impressive as well. Butterfly.ai. And pursuant to the motto of the show today, I am curious to ask you this question because I know a little bit about you and the background of the software. What is the best piece of advice that you've received from an expert?
All right. So I think the best piece of advice I ever gotten was from one of my managers when I was at a Coca-Cola company before. And it's very simple. It was be proactive in your learning and take ownership of your growth. So
Hmm.
it was really about like, don't wait for the opportunities or the knowledge to come to you. Try to actively seek them out. But most importantly, it's about to understand not to just what is your immediate task right now. It's more about how does it fit in the great pictures? How does your role fit in a broader goal at the company as well?
Hmm.
And that goes hand in hand about building strong relationships internally, externally. So with colleagues, with your managers, with clients, with all different stakeholders, really about communicating effectively so that you can reset expectation, but ultimately is to be a continuous learner. So keep on developing yourself, being adaptable, and try to contribute positively to your team because that builds the best foundation, the strongest foundation for a successful career.
I love that. Do you remember approximately how long ago that was? Is that recent years or is that when you
Yes.
were
No,
starting
it was a
out?
while ago. I'm a bit older than I look, I guess. It was, I want to say 2011, 2012. So over a decade ago now.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, investing in yourself is one of the best ROIs you can get when you're relying on yourself for income and ideas and all kinds of things, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's really about how you put yourself forward and afterwards how people see you. And when we think about Butterfly and what we build as a platform, it's the same idea. It's really making sure that by understanding how your team is doing, the level of well-being, the level of understanding of where as a manager you can make a difference, it's all about making sure that people understand the impact they have. But most importantly is for them to keep on growing as an individual. And that's like one of the core reasons people will stay longer at the company as well, making sure they know where they fit in the big picture.
Do you remember? I mean, I guess it's been at least what 10, 15 years where you were at a point in your life? Meaning, what prompted that advice, and do you
Yeah.
remember where you were when you got that?
So it was during my weekly one-on-one with my manager. And the company back then, so current company was going through some changes and I just decided to stay instead of taking my check. And I got a very big promotion. And I was thinking about what was next for me
Mm.
because I was scared to kind of locking myself into the role of a specialist. Like as you mentioned, my last position was leading really the Coca-Cola co-brand in terms of digital transformation in, I think it was like last 2014. But like 2011, 2012, I saw myself starting to lock myself into a specific role, which I was a bit afraid of. And one of the opportunities I had was to go to learn and study at an MBA. And I had a conversation with my manager, and he was very forthcoming with me, saying that being comfortable will not move the needle forward.
Mm.
So try to understand what are your shortcomings, try to understand you as a person, what is the best move for you, because I had different avenues. I could carry on my career and grow within the same organization and kind of lock myself into this specialist role, or go elsewhere, get outside of my comfort zone, get new knowledge, come back, because I went back to the Coca-Cola company after my MBA, bring all the knowledge I had with me to really expand my role, expand my footprint. Because when I had the advice, I was head of digital marketing for a small part of Europe, which was called Benelux, so Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg. Went for my MBA. When I came back, I started to lead core brand for Western Europe. So it was a way bigger role. But the advice always stuck with me, even when we started Butterfly, is something I always think about. And it goes hand in hand as well with doing great by doing good, making sure that people understand how the positive impact you can have on them, making sure that people around you are elevated thanks to you. And at the end of the day, that makes you a better person, I think.
I love that. I love that. So the next part of the question is tell us a little bit of the story. So when you think about that advice and you think about the past 15 years, is there anything that you'd share today that comes to mind over the past 15 years as something that a way that you've really been able to invest in yourself, learn? What has that translated to specifically for yourself?
Yeah. So not within the professional world specifically, but I try every few years to pick something new that I never done before. So for example, I started to learn to play basketball when I was 24, 25, which I never played before, though I'm quite tall. I never really played. I started to play a lot of different sports from scratch because I always liked the expansion. So for example, after basketball, I picked up rugby when I was 30 years old. That resulted in a couple of, I would say, bad injuries, but that didn't really stop me. And now with work, and I try to spend, I would say, 10% of my time onto something very different. Because I think that the older we get, we have the notion that time goes fast, and there is a reason behind it because we are so used to the task that we are doing that it almost becomes like I would say like a reflex, an automatism. Whereas when you start something new, you really have to go deeper into either things that will serve you better and therefore bring up your value. But for me, it's really about an exercise in mind to keep sharp. So a routine I do, for example, is every day I do the New York Times Sudoku, and I try to do it very fast, like just trying to keep on being sharp. And that actually helps me to keep me on my feet and think fast. And I would use that as well in terms of with work, where I think when we build a company, we surround ourselves with people that are way more knowledgeable than we are.
Mm.
And I feel that by doing that, you elevate yourself as well. And nobody, I think, well, some people like to be the smartest person in the room. I personally don't. I much rather learn from the smartest person so that you can become a really good generalist and you can have a ton of impact across the board as well.
That's a great attitude. I love that. Why hire people and tell them exactly what they should do when you hire somebody and they can tell you what to do, right?
100%.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it's done well for you, and you're successful as an entrepreneur in life with Butterfly. Congratulations on your success. Looking at the education landscape today, is there any particular resource that you find? Like, what's the top one or two resource for entrepreneurs, executives that you
Yeah.
find as a go-to for education and learning?
So I love podcasts in general. Then you have to find the one that you like because I love storytelling, and I think that for me is the best way to really remember things is when people tell me their stories, and I love to listen to that. So I would say podcasts and find the one that you like because some very famous one might not fitting your style. So I say try a few until you get the one that you like. I did a lot of reading books in general, not necessarily like the newest biographies, but sometimes a bit older ones that are, I would say, on my bookshelf. I would say like ChatGPT is freaking amazing. Like I would use ChatGPT on when there is a concept I don't really understand. I would just like use queries for that. For example, like explain me like my 5 year old. Like just break it down to me. How can I better understand this problematic? And I would say with some of the newer feature, you can really challenge the model, and the model can really challenge you.
Mm.
So not long ago, there was a project I was working on, and I had zero knowledge on how to do it. It was a Python script, and I never learned Python before. It's really something tied to product. And I asked the chats to break it down to me on how can I learn to fix a model on a 2 day course and give me every single detail on how I can go through it. So I would say, yeah, it's definitely a huge resource and
That's brilliant.
an endless one because you can always go through something else and else. It's like a wormhole.
That's brilliant. What a great resource. Now, when you're using ChatGPT, do you train it a certain way, or do you have a prompt that you found works best, or you start from scratch based on what you want to learn that particular day?
Yeah, great question. So I have a couple of GPTs I created where you kind of feed them and they keep on learning nonstop. Sometimes I like to start from a blank slate because whenever you feed a bot or like you feed a model is based on your own knowledge or what you feed them with. And I think going back to the advice I received in the past, like seek learning and keep on growing, like sometimes it's important to have a very different perspective. So often I would start from scratch, but in my prompt, I would give details on how I want them to respond to me. So like I mentioned, like sometimes I said, just imagine I'm a 5-year-old. I have no knowledge whatsoever. Use the complicated concept and adapt them to a very simple way of doing it. And I remember like on this specific model, it was about buying toys and changing toys. So it was really interesting because he said, imagine that you go into a toy store and you go and you look at the top shelf and what is the product that you like. And so I think what's important whenever you create a prompt is to really remind the model is who is the person in front. And in my case was imagine I'm a 5-year-old that just want to go toy shopping and use that as how you say like as the idea behind explaining me the model that is more complex.
I love that. And back to podcasts. I love podcasts as well. They're so great because you just pop it on your phone. You can listen wherever you are. What are the top 2 or 3 podcasts that you find yourself listening to the most these days, at least?
So I am I'm a sucker for How I Build This.
Okay.
I think
NPR, right?
it's yeah, because I think it's great storytelling and they're quite long, so you can really listen to them in I would say like in at chunks, or if you are, for example, when I'm driving, I would listen to a full one. So I think this is a really good one. I listen to the daily every day. I think it's quite a solid one. Then there's a couple of other. There's the Coaching for Leaders. I think it's a good resource for business owners that's been there for a while. Another one, top of I should go to my Spotify playlist right now.
So The Daily, in case anybody wants to look that up, who do you remember who produces that offhand?
Yeah, the Daily is New York Times, so it's a news update where they pick a topic and they go through a deeper analysis of it. So it's really, I would say, often top of the news. And then there's yeah, you can find it on every single platforms.
Okay. So
And
The
then there's
Daily with
another.
the New York Times, How I Built This, with Guy Raz, NPR. I love that one as well. And you're right, it's the long form content does really well when you've got a drive or a flight, or you just put it on the background and
Yeah.
listen to some amazing inspirational stories, right?
And then there's another one I really like is I think it's from Morning Brew, and the name is
Earnings. Okay.
yeah.
I'll have to check
That's
that one out. I've not tried that one yet.
yeah, it's Morning Brew. It's called After Earnings. They interview very senior CEOs of public traded companies, and it's always like full of tidbits. The 2 hosts are awesome.
Mm.
They're like very knowledgeable, have a great sense of humor. It makes like a very very fun listen. And if we are in the same realm of finances, the best one yet used to be the Robin Hood podcast, and now it's like a daily. Doesn't take more than 50 minutes to go through it, but of course you need to make sure to make the time to listen to all of them.
Very cool. Well, thanks for sharing. So, last question today. What piece of advice would you have for listeners, viewers today from the angle of business, right? So if you were talking to another entrepreneur, CEO, what advice would you give today? I mean, you've raised capital, you've worked corporate enterprise, you're crushing it with your startup. You've got your own unique angle now, your own experience. What would you tell somebody else today?
Yeah, so I would say take a moment and breathe. And when things are tough for you, so when, for example, you feel that you are facing a mountain, just take a step back. And when you realize it's not one big mountain, but just a couple of hills, one after the other, so go one hill at a time.
Mm,
Because things are tough. Things are not always easy. But if you look in the grand scheme of things, there's always a way out. There is always a way to go through it. Don't tackle the big problem at once. Try to deconstruct it in tiny bite-sized pieces that allows you not only to go through it, but to have like macro wins. And another thing, actually, my wife told me one day, do your beds. Every morning, do your bed, because regardless of the day and how bad it goes or how great it goes, at least you made your bed and you accomplished something. And I think it came from a very famous commencement speech that I never listened to. Where she was telling me like I was not ever doing my bed in the morning, and since I met her, actually I'm doing it. And it's really about having the sense of accomplishment, like you completed something today. So when you are faced in adversity, faced into a very tough situation, just take a step back, look at the macro wins you can get, and eventually you're gonna get over the hump.
I love that. How true is that? I've heard the always start by making your bed. I don't remember the exact source. We could look it up, but I think it's a military
Yeah, I
concept.
think so as well.
Somebody who's a former high profile or high operating military world started with that. So that's
Yeah,
great. And I love your comment about treating a mountain as a series of hills, because you're right. Being an entrepreneur, being a leader, being a CEO is hard, right? There's no easy track or fast track, and just like you can't make it up a mountain in one fell swoop without stopping.
exactly.
There's going to be ups and downs. So I love that perspective on that for other leaders. Thank you for sharing.
My pleasure.
Well, this has been super fun. I appreciate you being on, Simon, and just taking a minute out of your day. Butterfly.ai, I know, is your main company that you're working on now, doing
Yeah.
employee intelligence software. If anybody wants to get a hold of you from the podcast today, what is the best way to find you, connect with you, reach out to
Yeah, of
you?
course. Yeah, so the easiest would be LinkedIn. So Simon Rakosi. Luckily, there is only one of them, so you can't get wrong there. Or email simon@butterfly.ai. Usually, I respond to everything I get. So that's where you
Very
can
good.
find me.
Simon at Butterfly.ai. We'll put that in the show notes as well for your full name and spelling and everything. I know you're on the road today on the go, so this has been super fun. Thank you for sharing. I feel like I learned something, and even the hill and mountain. I mean, I've heard that before, but nobody's brought it up or mentioned it recently, and I know that's going to be even inspirational for me today with some things that I'm facing. I gotta remember that as well. So thank you for encouraging me.
Glad it helped out. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, hey, safe travels.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.